Hi everyone, it's Sherry from OurLifeHomeschooling.com, where I share homeschooling encouragement for everyday moms. I want to do a Q&A with you today with some questions I've been getting over on YouTube. These are questions that are kind of hard to do a whole video on. It's easier to just go down through and answer some of them. So that's what I'm going to be addressing today. Hopefully there's not too many cuts and edits in this. I'm not the greatest off the cuff, but I'm going to try to just answer these one by one. If you're new here, my name is Sherry. I'm a homeschooling mom to 10 kids. I love coming on here every week and encouraging other moms in the great work that you're doing in your homes. Recently, I did a video on homeschooling boys and I got this great question. I'd like to see a video on how you keep your teen boys who aren't old enough to have jobs busy when they're finished with their schoolwork for the day. Free at home hobbies for boys. I find my girls can keep busy, but my pre-working boys just read and maybe play catch for a bit and then they are bored. I know that boredom can create creativity, but sometimes not for every individual. I think there's a window of time with boys where they're a little bit older than that play stage where they can just run outside and play for hours and hours. And yet they're not at that stage where they can go out and drive and meet up with friends, where they're working. And that is a really tricky time. We have our kids, our boys, involved in sports. I completely relate to this mom who says that her girls just don't need to be kept busy. We have the same thing here in our house. Our girls just, they keep themselves busy. They find things to do that are productive, creative, whatever. And our boys just seem to need more. So I wouldn't hesitate to have some jobs around the house, some things that are challenging, like mowing the lawn. Our son, we have a fairly large property and he mows all of our grass. It takes him a lot of time. Keep them busy with work around the house, busy with sports. I would make it my like a top priority is to come up with things, maybe joining a gym or taking some classes. I would just make this a top priority for me because boys need to be kept busy. And for us, the boys getting jobs really did help. It helped as soon as they were able to start working more. Again, there is just that window of time where I think this becomes a little bit harder. Okay, the next one is narration. I don't really know what narration is. I'd like to understand it from the basics. I'm going to be doing a video on narration. I am super excited about it. I hope to do a blog post as well. I've been reading the book Know and Tell by Karen Glass. It's so good. And I've been doing narration with my kids for 14 years of homeschooling. If you are not doing copywork and narration in your homeschool, you are missing out on one of the easiest yet most effective writing tools that are available. I believe in narration so much. It's one of the main ways that I use to teach my kids to write. It's very simply just telling back. In fact, it's probably something you're already using in your homeschool without even realizing it. When you do things like maybe you're starting a new lesson and you say, so what happened in the last lesson, or what did we learn last? That's a chance for your kids to narrate. And narrating is taking the normal and the natural way of telling a story or of writing something and producing it naturally, and then it turns into writing, a written narration with time. So I'm going to be doing a full video on this, and the next question this person asks is, how do you make it an expected part of your day, and do you do every reading? My daughter really struggles with narrating something that I just read with her, and if she reads it on her own, she either struggles to remember or she remembers so much that it ends up taking an incredibly long time, and I have other kiddos to attend to. How do you check in with your kids at the end of the day in a timely manner? First of all, I kind of approach narration the way I approach a lot of other things. I focus on certain aspects of our homeschool more at certain times than others. So sometimes narrating is on autopilot. The kids are still doing it, but maybe it's not something I'm focusing on at that time in our homeschool. And at the beginning of the year, I talked about how this year I want to focus, one of my goals is to focus more on narration, because it's something that's just been kind of on a back burner. So my kids have been doing their narrations, but I haven't been checking up on them regularly like I will when I start focusing on it. So the answer is that when I'm focusing on narration, I will be asking them every day to orally narrate something, at least the younger kids. The older kids, I have them do usually 2 narrations, written ones a week. And then it really has become very much a part of just what we do. Just asking them questions about, tell me what you did in your class at co-op today, and tell me what you learned about in your history reading today. What was in your science lesson, or what did you learn from your nature study that you went and wrote about today? Asking them questions like these gives them a chance to tell back to you, and you can always ask for more details, or I always have kids that give too many details and you want them to just summarize it. So that's just a little bit, just telling a little bit of how we work narration. Again, I'm going to be doing a full video on that. I'm excited to share with you some of the ways that we begin with oral narration and then move on to written narration as they get older. I believe so much in how effective narration is. When you tell something to someone, it works some of the hardest muscles in your brain. And if you don't believe this, I think you just need to try it. Read a paragraph or go experience something and then come back and tell the person you were with, I'm going to narrate this back to you. And it's a little bit more difficult than you realize. And when you have to tell everyone every detail and put everything in order, it works something in your brain that just, it cements those thoughts and those ideas in your brain. It's so much more effective than answering multiple choice questions or filling in the blank questions. When you have to tell something and put it in the correct sequence, it just is so much more challenging. That's why I think it's so effective, and it's why I use it with my kids so much, why I've used it over the years. Another question I have is about my morning daily routine for home management alongside homeschooling. And I think when people ask a question like this, they're looking for like a list of things that I do and what time I do it, what time I get up, and I am not a type A person. Maybe I could be, but with 10 kids, I've had to really become flexible, and I've had to accept that things are not going to be, they're often not the way that I would like to be. If I had my choice every morning, I would get up before the kids are up. I'd have at least an hour, and I would sit and read my Bible, have a little devotional time, just have some time to maybe look at my planner and write things down for the day. That has not been a reality in my life. I've been often pregnant, and then I'll have a baby for a year that's up in the middle of the night. My mornings are not predictable, and I think that a lot of moms, this is what is reality for them. And so I've thought about doing a morning routine video, but the more I think about it, my morning routines, there's not a lot that I can just put on paper and say, this is exactly how it looks. This is how I make it work. I can give you 2 things and that are a priority for me, and I make these a priority no matter what. So this looks differently every day, but this is what's important to me to get in. The first thing is I have to have some time alone in God's Word. And sometimes this works out great. I can get up, I'll put the baby in a chair, give him some Cheerios or a little snack, sit down with my Bible and my coffee, and I can do it before everyone else gets up and spend some time that way. Sometimes I wake up to just one emergency after another, and I know as a mom you can relate. And so For that, just the first chance I get, I spend it opening my Bible, looking for God's wisdom for the day. That's something that is always a priority, because I've seen in my life how dependence on the Lord has been my fuel. It has been what's carried me through some of the most difficult spots in homeschooling and in my life. The second thing that is a priority for me is serving my kids. And because kids come with no handbook, they're completely unpredictable, even if you have routines in place. When you get up in the morning, you may have a child that wet the bed, or another child might be sick and throwing up. We were all sick about a week ago. It was so exhausting. Any routine I had went out the window, and we were just in survival mode. Things like this happen all the time. So my second priority is just to serve my kids and get them their breakfast. I've always told them they have to do 3 things in the morning before we start our morning time, and that is get dressed, brush their teeth, and make their bed. So just reminding them of that every morning, and then getting the baby fed, helping the little ones get their breakfast. So I think giving my 2 priorities is a little bit better answer to that question. First, spending time in God's Word, and secondly, serving my family. That is just a better answer, and that may not be what some people are looking for, but that's the reality. Okay, this mom asks for just some practical encouragement. Simple things like, in what order do you go with your kids when you're working one-on-one? When you can't get to work with one child, what do you do? Do you skip that child, help or assign it to another child, or start there the next day instead of your usual place? So I've talked a lot of times on here, and this mom is talking about after our morning time when the kids break up and we do individual schoolwork. I usually try to just meet the needs where it's most pressing. And this changes. Sometimes I could maybe decide, all right, I'm going to just work with the 5-year-old every morning. I'm going to start with him and get his lessons done. He's learning to read. But sometimes my 5-year-old will be doing something independent. He'll be doing great. And my 9-year-old will be really emotional and having a hard time with his math and really need me. So I just meet whatever needs are present first. And as soon as our kids are reading and writing, I move them to be independent with their work, so they're able to, and they get excited about being able to go through their checklist on their own. And so if it's not one of those children, then it's a younger child, and I'll meet their needs first. So I don't really have a method with how I do that, because I know how much it changes from day to day. Another thing is that we make progress the main goal for us. So I used to make curriculum plans. This was years ago when I was newer to homeschooling. I would make a plan for the week, and we had to get through those lessons by the end of the week. And if I didn't meet that goal, I would just work like double time to get it done, because in my head that was so important. And what I learned was, with our oldest, I did this with him. What I learned was we got farther ahead than we needed to be, specifically in math. And he finished with his math program early and was ready for Algebra 1 earlier than he needed to be. And I had worked so hard to get to that point, and I didn't have to. And it was stressful at times. And so because of that, I've become much more laid back. And I realize that, number one, you do get twice as much done in a homeschool day than you would in school. And secondly, it's just not worth it. Keeping progress as your goal rather than trying to get to a certain point by a certain time is going to relieve you, and it's going to make your kid enjoy learning so much more. It's going to make them be able to go at a pace that's enjoyable for both of you. So for us, the main goal is just progress. And I don't try to get to a certain spot by a certain time. What do you do when your housework gets behind? So Now, if I were completely honest, and I will be, I feel like housework is a large percentage of homeschooling. In fact, as soon as we finish our breakfast, we have morning time, and then after morning time is when we all do our chores every day. And I am always reminding my kids, because they want to finish morning time and get right to their schoolwork and get started on their checklist so they can be done with it. And they don't want to do their chores and their housework, or they'll try to get through it really quickly. And I remind them, the housework is your first schoolwork. This is important in order to function as a family, for our schoolwork to get done. You can't just bring all of your work box and all of your schoolwork onto the table that's full and has sticky syrup and dishes half on it. We have to have a clean space before we can work. And so it's hard sometimes to be that person that's, when you're the mom, you're always like reminding everybody, oh, you missed this piece of paper, or you missed this, or hey, did you clean this in here? This is not good enough. It's not fun to be that person, but everyone loves having a clean space to work in when it's done. So, I would just encourage you that this is not the fun part of homeschooling, the housework, but it's a necessary part. It's the part that brings peace to your home. And for me, it is a large part of what we do. We try not to start school until our home is it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be picked up. This mom says, I was curious if you would talk about older kids and doing independent work off by themselves. So I'm not sure exactly what she's talking about, but I will say that some of my kids, it really depends on their personality. Some of my kids are such social people that they want to be at the table in the kitchen where everyone else is. If I would ask them to go to their desk in their room, which most of them have a desk in their room where they can go if they want to, this child that would be like a punishment, because they're so social. They want to be where everyone is, and that is a place where they can work. But I've also had sometimes those kids that are social are constantly distracted by what's going on. And so I'll have to have that child go to a room by themselves, and they don't like it. And yes, it is a punishment or a consequence, you could say, but they just need that focused attention. And then some kids just love being in their rooms by themselves to do their work. One thing we have is we don't allow any screens in a bedroom or in another room, not just for protection for the kids, but also because of the distractibility. Our kids have been, for the most part, able to do a lot of their independent work on their own. In fact, once they get into high school, it kind of surprises me. I almost feel like I'm not homeschooling them as much, and I miss, I have to reach into their world to find out what's going on. They've grown up with a love of reading, of just learning in general. So it's not like they don't like doing their schoolwork, but it's just a part of their routine, and they just want to get to it and finish it. I do have some kids that need some help with me one-on-one and are struggling, older kids that are struggling in certain subjects. And I would just say this. Now, our older kids go to a second co-op where they get all their classes, most of their classes, from outside teachers. And that has just been a good fit for our family with having the wide age range that we have. And so for some of them, they've needed more one-on-one time. But for the most part, they're able to do their schoolwork on their own and haven't had too much difficulty with it. The next one is asking about our meal planning routine. How much food you buy on each haul. How does that work in a large family? And I'll tell you, first of all, I have found that if I have meat that's defrosting in my refrigerator, if I have meat, I always have a meal. So I have to remind myself to always get out meat that I need for the next meal, and then we're good to go. On our property here, we have almost 4 acres, and we grow our own chicken and pork, and then we raise some pork in exchange for beef with a friend of mine. So it really, really helps that we have freezers full of meat, because like I said, if I have meat, that is a main meal. And then we do a ton of gardening. I consider this part of our home life, our schoolwork. To me, those things really intertwine quite a bit, because as soon as it gets nice here, the kids are out with us in the garden. They do a ton of gardening, planting, harvesting, preserving. We do it all together, and we do it together because it's a learning process for them, and because they all feel like they're contributing to the whole family. And when we open a can of green beans or of beets and we go to eat it, this is their contribution. They contributed to it. They had a part in it. And I think that's really rewarding for kids to know how things come to the table, and then to know that they had a part in it is very validating for them. So we do a lot of gardening. We have meat in our freezers. And as far as the grocery shopping, we go grocery shopping usually every 2 weeks, and we just go to a local store around here. And my husband and I are very, I think, abnormal personalities. He likes grocery shopping. It's a chore. It's not something I would choose to do. And so he uses that time to take a couple kids with him, and he's happy to do all the grocery shopping. And then that gives me some time here by myself, or maybe just with just a fewer kids who are playing or something. And so I don't do a ton of the grocery shopping. That's something that my husband does. And as far as meal planning, I have a list in the back of my planner. I've had it for years, of all the chicken dishes that I make, all the beef dishes and pork dishes that I make, and also my breakfast, lunch, and dinner options. And I don't have them planned. I've done meal planning in the past, and what I've found is that by the time we go to eat it, or the time it's time to make it, maybe that night I have something else going on and I don't want to make that meal. It's too involved. Or I'll go to make it and my husband's like, ugh, can we have something else? And he doesn't usually complain, but sometimes I feel that way, where I have something on my plan and I go to make it and I just don't want that night. So meal planning is something that doesn't work great for us, but as long as I have a list of meals, and we usually get the same groceries every 2 weeks that are ingredients for those, then we just pick and choose. I look at my list during this homeschool day. I look at my list of meals for lunch, and sometimes I'll just ask the kids, all right, what do we want to have? And so I guess you could say we are really laid back about it. That works for us. Making meals is another part of homeschooling that just takes up a ton of time. And I'm sure if I did probably faster, more processed meals, then I wouldn't spend so much time on it. But we like eating good home-cooked food. It's part of why we homeschool, so it takes up a little bit more time. I hope that answers some of these questions for you. If you have other questions, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear where some of you guys are at. Everyone's at a different spot in homeschooling, and even where we are right now is so different from where I was 10 years ago, 14 years ago when we started out. It changes. When you have all little ones, it's so much more intensive. You're doing a ton more of the work. And even back to the housekeeping question, when my kids were all little, my house was not as put together as it is now. It was hard to keep up with. There were more of them than there are of me, and they were all little, so they couldn't do as good of a job helping with chores and stuff. It was harder to keep after them. So our homeschool looked completely different back then. And at that time, I was just trying to get the foundations of our homeschool going. And so the housework, I felt like if I would do housework and wait till it was clean, we would never get to our schoolwork. So things were different back then than they are now. Everyone's in a different place with their homeschooling. So Just let me know if you have some other questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. I hope you're having a great week with your kids. I want to encourage you and challenge you to keep going. Sometimes the winter months are the hard ones because it's just cold and dreary, and without the sunlight, we're inside a lot more, and it's hard to just be faithful and be consistent. And I want to encourage you to keep doing that in your homes. Have a great day. I'll see you next week.